Welcome to the Current Times with Richard Cox and Adam Fitzgerald, where every week we will be reporting on the current news topics from around the world encompassing various pertinent areas such as geopolitics, environmental issues, and the overall human condition. In today's report, we will be reporting on the current status of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, a 2-month ceasefire in Yemen between the Houthi rebels and Saudi Arabia, as well as the rapidly declining disapproval ratings of the Biden administration. Welcome to the Current Times. Well, the current crisis right now is, of course, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Currently, the United Nations has asked Zelensky and Putin to meet to discuss the end of the war, whereas the United States wants to lob a fresh round of sanctions against Russia. It just seems that everybody outside the United States has been trying to get to the round of talks, but the United States, all they know is how to deal out sanctions. And according to a CNBC article just a few days ago, Russia had set a new ultimatum for surrender in the battered city of Mariupol, where Ukrainian forces and reportedly hundreds of civilians are holed up in the steel plant, which is facing their last days of hours, according to one Ukrainian commander. The officials in Ukraine continue to call for more weapons and faster delivery as the Russian military continually bombs east of the Donbass east of the Donbass region. Meanwhile, the United States, as well as some of the coalition partners like Germany and France, they're preparing a massive new arms package for the Ukraine. Now, this is according to anonymous sources who spoke to MSNBC and NBC, as well as Chinese imports of Russia, which have plummeted due to the United States threatening the country with sanctions on its own. I think Russia likely wants to be able to show like significant success ahead of the their holiday, which is called like Victory Day, I think it's called, on May 9th.
Victory in World War II, essentially.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Richard.
Which to them has a resonance with this current conflict, because they see obviously the denazification campaign is what's emphasized.
Right.
And apparently that's a huge holiday in Russia, right? Because like bigger than the way it is celebrated in the United States. It celebrates the victory. World War II, the victory is celebrated quite substantially in Britain, but the Russians lost 28 million people, right? So there's nowhere where that's a bigger victory than in Russia. Nowhere where that kind of means more.
Right. And I believe the largest loss of life in that war was the Battle of Stalingrad. What was it? I think 1 million people in a month or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Russia right now, I think Russian forces are advancing toward, I'm going to butcher the name, Kramatorsk, which is the capital of Donbass. And they continue to suffer from rocket fire attacks and guerrilla attacks as well on the front lines of the war. And this is the cause of contention, right? Because the Donbass is made up of two pro-Russian self-declared republics in Lushansk and Donbass, which we have mentioned before in previous videos. And if I can quote what the Russian ministry added, and I took this quote from CNN, high levels of Russian air activity endure as Russia seeks to provide close air support to its offense in eastern Ukraine to suppress and destroy Ukrainian air defense capabilities. Now, currently, I think what's happening is something that you alluded to a couple of weeks back, which I think is the most feasible, most realistic scenario, is that this will not be a full-scale war by any means because of the threats involved with the United States and Russia regarding nuclear weapons. But I think what's happening is that the United States and Germany and France and Great Britain, that they'll keep sending these weapons to these forces, which are linked to ultra-nationalist separatist groups, and that what happens is that you'll have years and years of proxy wars. And I think it'll be similar to 1979 in Afghanistan when it's all said and done. Now, will we see a repeat of another fascist ultra right-wing group, but this time it'll be a nationalist entity in the neo-Nazis in the region? Well, we'll have to wait and see in the next 9 to 10 years. But currently, right now, it just seems that every other country wants to at least come to the peace talks table and try and get Russia to retreat out of the capital, Kiev, and out of the major cities west of the country. And so that would be the latest news for Ukraine currently.
Yeah, I was quite disturbed. I heard John Mearsheimer give a talk recently, and he's been, I think, the most prominent voice for the Russian perspective in the West, and was talking about the ultimate inevitability of this conflict arising for years now because of NATO's Eastward movement and so on. And it was, the disturbing part was he didn't really see an end in sight. He didn't see a way this could resolve now. He didn't see that there were incentives for Washington, D.C. to back down in supplying the Ukrainians, so they can just keep on supplying them and fund an insurgency war indefinitely, essentially, and they're kind of motivated to do so. And the Russians can't lose. So that was, like, for someone like that to express that kind of hopelessness about it was, yeah, quite disturbing, really. Have you, what do you make of it, Adam? Like, because I hear conflicting accounts. Like, so on the one hand, you have people like Scott Ritter, who I listened to a very compelling interview where he described how it was actually all going swimmingly for Russia, and what you had seen was a fake out, a kind of a feint, a pincer movement on Kiev that wasn't, to convince everyone that was the direction they were going, and then a pulling back from that to position the Ukrainian army where they wanted it to be. And other voices saying that's ridiculous. This clearly wasn't a feint at all. This was clearly an operation to take Kiev that then didn't succeed. So I find it hard to know what's going on in the midst of these things at all, because you seem to get compelling arguments for various different positions, really.
Well, we've covered this before about Russia's goals regarding Ukraine. I think it's actually partly honest here. So let's go with the honesty first. I think what they're trying to do is save Ukraine from becoming part of the NATO agreement. And because Russia itself has their own NATO ship, and I forgot the name of it, Russian Treaty Organization, something to that effect, where it's two countries, and it's Uzbekistan, I want to say, and I forgot the name of the other country. But what happened in 1991? We saw an eastward expansion of NATO, where I think there was that famous quote where it was told to Stephen Hadley, or if I got the name right, the U.S. Secretary of State from Gorbachev, that they wouldn't move 1 inch east. And then in the next, 20 somewhat years, they captured 18 countries in Eastern Europe. So, I mean, Russia saw the writing on the wall. So what they wanted to do was basically save Ukraine from becoming part of NATO and being surrounded. At the other hand, where's the dishonesty? Well, I mean, they swore that they wouldn't capture the city of Kiev. They wouldn't go westward of the country, and they're committing war crimes. Let's call it for what it is, killing civilians and whatnot. But the hypocrisy stands. I mean, for how dare the United States basically come out and say that, oh, we're intervening because of the continued war crimes of Russia. Meanwhile, the United States is the largest violator of human rights anywhere in the world. There's no country that even compares. I mean, currently, we're seeing the largest humanitarian crisis in Yemen, which we'll get into in a minute. So I'm more surprised at I shouldn't be, but I'm more surprised at the hypocrisy shown by the United States here. Now, when it comes to the coalition partners of the United States with Great Britain, France, Germany, look, I think that they see the threat that this could entail for the future regarding, them, because they're right there in the middle of the front lines. They could suffer mass casualties regarding if this ever came to full fruition of a full war. And so they would like to see peace in the region. I mean, it's not everybody's a sociopath here. So do I see peace talks? Yeah, in the way that there's at least a half-hearted attempt at peace talks with Iran, but that's the United States' fault because they only they didn't take off, say, the Revolutionary Guard off the sanctioned list. So I think that there will be a lot of concessions here when it comes to Russia. But at the same time, if the Republicans take the House and Senate in November of this year, and in 2 years, if we get a Republican president, we may not see a war with Russia, but do we see a war looming with China or Iran? Well, that I guess that waits to be seen. So.
Okay, and is that another thing you want to talk about, Adam, or maybe not in this order? I don't know. The situation with the Biden regime at the moment, or do you want to talk about Yemen?
Yeah, what's funny is this conflict with Ukraine, as well as the repressive mandates from COVID, not to mention the most unpopular vice president in U.S. history, Kamala Harris, who incidentally just got COVID yesterday, according to her Twitter account. According to the Harvard Crimson, Biden's approval ratings continue to slide among young Americans, which is a real shock because you consider young Americans who dissuaded from voting with Trump and sided with Biden, according to Democratic polls, especially the Gallup poll. Now, this was posted just yesterday, where according to this approval poll, in the spring of 2021, Biden was 58% approval rating with, I think, about 35% disapproval. By the fall of 2021, we are starting to see now more of a even percentage where the disapproval ratings have outweighed the approval ratings with 51% and Biden's approval rating 49%. In just 6 months. In the spring of 2022, in a key part of the administration, we are now seeing a overwhelming disapproval rating of 57% with a 42% approval rating, and that continues to slide between the ages of 18 and 29, and you would think that that would be the key age bracket for the Democratic Party. But as you could see through just this one poll by the Politics Youth Poll from the Harvard Institute, that is not the case. Now, the findings from the IOP, which is the biannual youth poll, the largest percentage ever in its history, and this is going back 21 years when they started this poll, of the biggest disparity between the approval rating and the disapproval rating in less than 6 months is the Biden administration. And that should tell you something, because the Biden administration basically has alienated the one age bracket that they desperately needed to get out and vote, which is the young, the youth, which is the alleged future progressives of the country. Now, the aspect of this, the more disparaging aspect for the left is that if this age bracket continues to disapprove in the next, say, 8 to 10 months, we're going to see a dramatic change in the House and Senate in November this year, where I have predicted that both the House and Senate will turn overwhelmingly red if they just run on the anti-mandate, just on the anti-mandates. But now it just seems that they don't even have to run on anything at all, because the Biden administration is basically failing in its own regard, almost in the same way the Trump administration failed in their final 8 months regarding their bumbling of Yemen crisis as well as COVID. So in less than, 2 years, the Biden administration basically lost the key age bracket when it comes to U.S. voters. Now, of course, I don't know how many, I think it was, according to this, it's over 40,000 that were polled. Now, that's a small number, but still, it should just get to show you a general idea. If that is the general framework of 18 to 29-year-olds, I will be shocked if the Democrats won the House and Senate and the presidency in 2024. For sure, they'll lose the House and Senate if they continue going this rate in 2022. They'll need to get rid of all the mandates for that to happen, as well as at least upholding to some of the promises that Biden had made. And, you know, what the one shocking break of that promise was, by the Biden administration basically said in the final weeks of the electoral debate was that he would end the Yemen war. And what did he do? The first week getting in office, he sends one of the largest aid deals to Saudi Arabia, one of the largest weapons deal to Saudi Arabia. I mean, just stunning. You know, and this happens every 4 years, Richard, is where, you know, we'll get promises from both the left and right, and immediately the United States general populace, the voting base, basically has this sudden amnesia where they tend to forget that both sides are playing them for just to remain in office.
And with regard to Yemen, Adam, I've been listening to Nasser Arabi on Scott Norton's podcast, and there seems to be some good news emerging from Yemen about a peace deal there that is more substantial than anything that's come before.
Yes, in fact, finally, at least some good news. Now, there has been a 2-month truce, which has been agreed to by warring parties in Yemen, and it is the first nationwide truce since 2016, which has, since the start of the war, which happened in 2016, we are now almost at the 500,000 point regarding, and this is according to United Nations estimates, 400,000 dead, over 2 million displaced. About 60% of those people had died from hunger, lack of health care, and just unsafe water, unsafe elements regarding Basra, Sana'a, the capital, and the deal between the Saudi-led coalition and the Houthi rebels, which can be extended if they both agree, which came into effect, I believe it was 2 weeks ago. And this comes at I think the peace deal came at the first month of the Islamic holy day, Ramadan. Now, this comes also at the eve of the final failed talks in Vienna regarding Iran and the United States, which I blame the United States wholly regarding those peace talks, as well as Israel, who basically wants to continue this conflict at the behest of U.S. soldiers, basically, because Israel never gets involved militarily, and neither does the Gulf. And that's Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates. And so the truce announcement that was made by the United Nations Special Envoy, which was led by Hans Gruber, on the second day of the peace talks in Riyadh, they finally came to an agreement. And I think at this time, they just want to gauge if we're going to look at both sides, the opposite, the positive and the negative. The positive is basically there's a lot of global outlash regarding backlash regarding the largest humanitarian crisis in the world, and nothing comes close. Not Ukraine, not what's happening in Palestine, which is the longest crisis. But I mean, 500,000 people dead in less than 5 years is just, just a genocide waiting to happen. And the United States are complicit because they're giving U.S. military aid to its ally in the region. And it doesn't help when you have a so-called progressive in office basically giving a country which is basically demanding the United States give them more oil production at the same time in which the United States said that they wanted. But the Saudi government, led by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who was basically running the country from his father, bin Salman, basically said that, no, we will not be producing more oil. But there's enough backlash to where, they're demanding peace talks to happen. And what will come from this? Are we going to see finally a break in the conflict itself? Well, that remains to be seen. I don't trust Saudi Arabia as well as I don't trust, NATO, United States, or Israel itself. I mean, these governments have a continual habit of breaking their side of the deals when it comes to the future conflict, because there are many variables at play here regarding foreign policy, regarding the private military industrial complex, regarding private military industrialists, regarding the lobbies of Saudi Arabia and Israel. There's a lot of money involved when it comes to war. Let's face it, that's the reality of it. There's no money when it comes to peace. And so who's running the world? These entities, that's who are, unfortunately, because if it was the public, if it was the people, we wouldn't have these conflicts to begin with. Now, during this break in the peace talks, fuel ships will be allowed passage, and this is coming from the BBC. Fuel ships will be allowed passage into the rebel-held port of Al Hudaydah on the Red Sea, and commercial flights as well will be able to operate from the airport in the rebel-held capital of Sana'a. And so what will happen is roads into the besieged part of the country of Yemen will finally be opened. They'll finally get water, food, the basic necessities of life. And I don't know if you want to Google the latest pictures of children that look like living skeletons at this point. It is atrocious. And the media blackout in the United States has been dead silence, when even just from the left and right, the hypocrites of this country, the fifth column, which is the media, the legacy media. And that's only because the United States involvement regarding sending military weapons, which is used in the Yemen war, in this disastrous conflict. The Saudi-led coalition backing Yemen's official government has been fighting the Houthis for the past, 6 or 7 years, using mainly airstrikes. By the way, the United States is providing training for those Saudi pilots as well inside the United States, with U.S. military bases out west here in Nevada, in California, and New Mexico. And the Houthis in turn have used drones and missiles, which are basically, not having any effect because they're not getting any weapon aid from any country except assistance from maybe Lebanon and Iran. But basically they're getting cut off because of this conflict in Syria. And maybe that's the reason why the United States is getting involved, because the Saudis and Israelis don't want a partnership between the Shia-led minorities of Iran, Syria, and Lebanon. And that, to understand that, we'll have to go into the history of past foreign policies regarding those that area of the region as well. What will come from this? I mean, I to tell you the truth, I really don't know. But I think, if you ask my opinion, I think this will be the conflict that will have an end to it, because of the global media outside the United States, which are basically having an effect, and a disparaging effect, on the so-called reformation government of Saudi Arabia by Crown Prince Salman, who, at the same time wants to be seen as a reformer, which is the reason why there has been such a divisive issue regarding certain old faces in Saudi Arabia that despise bin Salman, Crown Prince bin Salman, and his wish to eliminate or to subjugate the religious minority in the country because of the damaging effects that they had in the 90s and late 80s regarding the growing effects of Wahhabism, which led to these ghoulish groups like Al-Qaeda, Abu Sayyaf, and Jemaah Islamiyah, and which had terrorist attacks inside the United States and around the world, which basically called for or demanded and forced Saudi Arabia to begin subjugating these groups to begin with. And so in order for Saudi Arabia to basically survive in the eyes of the world, they had to crack down on these groups. And they destroyed, they did away with the religious police and the allowing women to drive. But make no mistake, just because he conceded to some of these repressive, ultra-Orthodox groups and their rules and decrees, doesn't mean that they still have a voice in the country. In fact, it's quite the opposite. They still have a very powerful voice within the country and in the region itself.
Okay, Adam, thank you very much for that. I think this has been our first attempt to run for a few news stories of the week, so I think a lot has come from this that we can build on. And if you're happy, we'll leave it there for this first episode and have another go at it next week. And whatever fresh emerge in the world.
We'll definitely do this on a weekly basis.
Maybe Peace on Earth will have broken out by then, and we can just talk about football or something.
I'd like to see we were
America's
behind.
Next Best Singer. Yeah. Thanks, Adam. See you next week.
Take care.